Hi everyone, it's your girl Stella Roberts and I'm back with another video. I'm so excited to be on this video because I'm going to be talking about something really dear to me, and that is my birth story. My birth story with my son, how my labor and delivery went. I've just been feeling like sharing it for a while now, especially because of how God was so present and, he helped me through that labor and delivery process. So 2 years ago, my son is 2.5 years old now. So in October of 2018, I gave birth to a baby boy. When I was pregnant, a couple of months prior to that day, I had a prayer to the Lord that when I would give birth, I desired to give birth quickly. I desired that, it would just be like 3 hours or 4 hours, quick, something quick that wouldn't last very long. I also had a desire to give birth at home, to do a home birth, and also to make sure that it was natural. So how it all began is that I had a dear friend who she gave birth, and it was her first child, and her labor was only for 2 hours. And I remember asking her, I was like, sis, like, wow, like 2 hours? Like, what did you do? How was your process? And her answer was so simple and yet so powerful. And what she did was she prayed and she asked the Lord for a 2-hour labor. So after that 2-hour labor and me being so in awe of that experience that she had, when it was my turn to be pregnant, I remembered that. I remembered her testimony, and it was an encouragement to me to begin to pray for the kind of labor and delivery that I want to have. So what kind of labor and delivery did I have? And what did I pray for beforehand? I had prayed for the Lord to give me a quick delivery, as I mentioned. And there were people that would pray for me. They would pray like really strange things, like, Lord, we pray that, I would have a labor that would be pain-free. For me, that was such a strange prayer that someone would pray for me, because I'm like, well, it's giving birth, like, it's gonna hurt. Of course it's gonna hurt, Anyway, so long story short, the months leading up to my pregnancy, when I was about 8 months pregnant, 7 to 8 months pregnant, I began to become restless. I had some back pain. Mind you, my entire pregnancy was easy. I didn't have any morning sickness. I didn't have any cramps. I didn't have any pressure on my sciatic nerve. I didn't have any complications whatsoever. Everything was just smooth and easy going. And then when it came to month 7, literally when I entered into the 3rd trimester of my pregnancy, I started having back pain because my frame was still very small. And so where my son was located inside of my womb and how he was growing and where he was kicking and all of the different scientific reasons that doctors can give you, he was pressing on my pelvic bone and causing it to separate in preparation for labor. And this was a painful experience for me. So I would complain a lot. But the thing is, it wasn't really that bad, but because I had no prior symptoms, to me, I felt like this is unacceptable. Like, Lord, like, why am I having this pain? And I would start to complain to the Lord every day. I remember I had a friend who, she gave birth to her child early, like a couple of weeks before the due date. And I remember feeling resentment in my heart and envy. And I was like, Lord, I want my child to be born early. Imagine that. I had become so selfish and so self-centered and in the pain, and I had allowed that pain to totally overwhelm me, that I began to hope for something like premature birth over my child. I'm not proud of it. But what I can say is that the Lord used that to humble me and to teach me about patience, long suffering, and the love of a mother. So for 2 months, I complained to the Lord. I thank God that He didn't cause my son to be born prematurely. But I complained for like 8 weeks to the Lord about how I didn't want this back pain and da 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 da. I was basically being like a spoiled brat to my father. And thankfully, God is a good father. He didn't give in to my begging and to my pleading for something that wasn't even righteous and just for me to ask for in the first place. So finally, I was 39 weeks pregnant, and I remember that the Lord had changed my heart posture. And so at 39 weeks, or at 38 weeks, I began to realize the selfishness of my prayers. I began to realize that I was just being, led by my flesh and just not having a godly response to the trial that I was facing. I wasn't being patient. I wasn't praying. I was just complaining. Finally, when I came to that realization, I repented and I was like, Lord, I'm so sorry that I would ask you to cause my baby to be premature. Like, there's so many complications that can occur with a premature baby. I myself was born a couple of weeks early, and I remember being sick often as a child. So I don't know if that's related, but it could be. I have thin retinas in my eyes. It could be that the extra days would have caused my retinas to form completely. So with all of that being said, at 38 weeks, I decided, Lord, and I prayed, Lord, to forgive me of, my selfishness. But I also prayed, Lord, help me to accept whenever it is that you decide that I'm going to give birth. I remember it was a Thursday. It was a Thursday night that I prayed that prayer. And I was like, Lord, I accept your will. I accept your way. And I remember that a couple of days prior in the same week, I had a phone call from a sister as well who told me, hey, like, if your birth plan doesn't go the way you plan for it to go, just trust God, that God knows best. And if He doesn't have you birth at home, if you end up with a C-section, don't worry. God is in control. He is in charge, and He will have His way. Because I was very bent. I was like, I'm going to give birth at home. I'm not going to have any epidural. I'm not going to have any penicillin. I'm not going to be in the hospital. I'm not going to be in a birth center. I'm going to be at home, and I'm going to do it all natural. I'm going to be super comfortable, and it's going to go well. So having that sister call me and tell me that in the same week that I realized that I needed to just accept that God was in control and that I can't force myself to give birth. Mind you, I had been trying different things. I'm like, okay, how can I, accelerate this? I went for walks. I was super active and all the things that they tell you to do to encourage, to basically naturally induce your labor. I tried those things, but they didn't work. So on that night, that Thursday night, that I prayed to the Lord and I said, Lord, I'm really sorry for how I've been behaving. I'm sorry for acting like I have no father, acting like, I have no values, and for even asking for such a thing like having a premature birth. And when I asked the Lord to forgive me, and when I just committed my whole pregnancy into the Lord's hands, I kid you not, that night, that Thursday night, October 25th, 2018, I had a dream that my stomach was deflated. And when I woke up in the morning from my sleep, my water broke. I was sitting on the couch and I had just woken up. I felt like I was gonna pee myself. I got up, I tried to get to the bathroom, but I was too slow. My water broke in the hallway on the ground. I remember I was like, oh my goodness, there's a gush, and then nothing. So literally nothing was happening after my water broke. I had no contractions whatsoever. And so I called my midwife and I was like, listen, I'm 39 weeks on the dot. It was the day of the 39 weeks. It was a Friday. And I called my midwife and I said, you know, my water broke, but I don't have any contractions. What do I do? And so she said, you know what? Come into the birthing center. We're gonna do an examination, and then we'll see how it progresses, because if you don't have any contractions and you don't give birth by 48 hours, then we'll have to admit you into the hospital, and you'll have to consider you know, being further induced or a C-section. And I was just like, oh Lord, please, like. But at the same time, I had that peace that surpasses understanding, because I had that sister that the Lord used to encourage me that if things don't go the way that I want them to go, then it's okay, because they'll go the way that the Lord wants them to go. So I still had peace, and I was like, you know what, like, God, your will be done. And then my husband, he drove us to the birthing center. We get to the birthing center, and literally the moment that he starts parking the car, I get this huge contraction. Because it was my first time with a baby, I didn't think that things would progress in that way. Since the midwife told me, you know, you're going to come in, you're going to get an examination, then you're going to go home, and then you'll call us when you start having contractions, yada, yada, yada. I didn't actually bring a baby bag with me, which is like, it was not a good idea. Because I didn't expect the series of events that occurred right after, I was not fully prepared. So my baby bag was at home. I think I had like a small little bag in the car with like a onesie, but it didn't have much else in there. It didn't have the snowsuit or the winter coat. I didn't have any hats, no socks, nothing. Like, I don't even think I had diapers. I think I only had that bag because it was given to me as a gift, and it's like a little newborn kit. So it had like 2 newborn diapers in there with like the smallest sample pack of wipes from Pampers, and then it had 1 onesie in there, and maybe it had a hat, but I don't think so, because I remember the birthing center giving me a hat. Anyway, with that being said, I get to the birthing center. My husband Ellis is parking the car, and literally I get this huge contraction. And it was painful, but I don't remember it. I think what it felt like was like a really bad period cramp. So I get this contraction, and I'm like, okay, praise God, you know, things are gonna progress. I remember that I was like, oh my goodness, like, you know, hurry up and park the car. And we ended up denting our car a little bit because I was stressing my husband out. I'm so sorry, Ellis. And from the parking lot of the birthing center to walking into the birthing center, which takes literally 2 minutes, my contractions were 2 minutes apart. So when my water broke at noon, there was nothing happening until about 2:30, which is 2 hours and a half later, 0 contractions. The midwives tell me, come in, we're gonna do an exam, you're gonna go back home, and we'll see how things progress. You have 48 hours to give birth naturally, otherwise we're gonna admit you to the hospital. I get to the birthing center at like 2:30, and I get 1 contraction, and then another, and then another, and then another, and right away it went from 1 contraction. I think 15 minutes later I had a second contraction, and then I had a contraction 5 minutes later, and then my contractions were 2 minutes apart, all in the space of like, what is that, 30 minutes. So we're upstairs. I remember being upstairs in the birthing center, and I remember walking in, and I was like, ow, you know, and there was always like newly pregnant people watching me, like, what is going on? I'm like, is she about to give birth? And I'm thinking to myself, Lord, I'm about to give birth. So I get into because at the birthing center that I was at, they had a section that was closed off, sealed off, which was basically where they had the birthing rooms and the kitchen and stuff like that. So we get to that side of the building, of the institution, and I go into the room, and the midwives are like, you probably still have a lot of time. Like, you know, usually with first time births, you know, people can go for like 12 to 16 hours. And I'm there and I'm telling them that my contractions are 2 minutes apart. And they didn't even believe me. They're like, oh, you know, we'll just see. And they're there looking at their watch, timing my contraction. And of course, they're like 2 minutes apart. But I feel like they didn't believe me because after the first few contractions, it's like the Lord gave me supernatural strength where I was able to tolerate them. So instead of like screaming out, I was still in pain, but taking like deep, hard breaths and like going kind of like or something like that. I don't know, like, you know, it was quiet. And so they didn't really believe me. And then I remember my midwife telling me, all right, so we'll send you home, and in 3 hours, you know, we'll come at the house so that you can do your home birth, you know? What do you think about that? And I was like, no. I am not leaving this birthing center because my baby is coming out of my body. And they were like, okay, you know, still not taking me seriously. But by the time that they stood there for like 10 to 15 minutes, they realized, okay, wait, maybe she knows what she's talking about. Maybe she does know what she's feeling. Maybe she does know her body. This whole time in my heart, I'm like praying to the Lord, like, Lord, help me through this. So I started laboring in the bathtub. And I felt like I was in another world. I felt like I was in a bubble with the Lord holding my hand. And my husband was so helpful. He was so supportive. He was really present and there for me. I would constantly need the bathtub to be super hot. And somehow my midwives had like popsicles. And I remember like I would literally eat a whole popsicle that was like that big. I would eat it in 2 bites. And must have been like 8 popsicles or like 7 popsicles or something during my labor. Which I think is really funny. The fact that someone would eat popsicles while like laboring. I don't know, like I never knew that these different things could, you know, be I don't know, you could have a craving while you're giving birth. Like, who knew? But anyways, so I'm there, I'm in the bathtub, I'm having my contractions every 2 minutes, every minute, every 30 seconds. But at some point, I stopped counting the time and I started focusing on what my body was doing. And I started just concentrating on giving birth to my baby boy. I remember this moment, this experience being so spiritual. It was supernatural and unearthly. One moment, I was there in the room with my husband and my midwives, and the next moment, I would literally be in a vision, in a trance-like state where, you know, the Lord would be encouraging me, telling me, you can do this. You're going to get through this. And I would talk back to the Lord and be like, Lord, I can't. And I remember thinking to myself at some point, I was like, why did I sign up to give birth with midwives at a birthing center or home birth? I was like criticizing myself. I'm like, Christelle, like, what were you trying to prove by coming here? You know, I think that if I was in a hospital, I honestly believe that there's a big chance that I would have asked for the epidural, because not because of the pain, but because it felt like it was an unending cycle. Like, yes, there was the contraction, the pain of the contraction, but then it felt like it never ended. Like, I was tired at this point, you know? Like, I was like, okay, like, can this be over? So at some point when I was communing with the Lord during my labor, I was like, Lord, I can't do this anymore. Please, please let it stop. I'm so tired and I just don't think I can do it. mind you, like, I didn't even have contractions for that long. You know, it was about 4:30 when I prayed that prayer. And I don't know what time it was, to be honest, but it was some point during the labor that I prayed that prayer. And when I prayed to the Lord and asked him to please help me, because I felt like I personally could not endure labor anymore, that's when I felt like my baby's head is gonna pop out of my body. It was so supernatural. So I pray this prayer. I ask the Lord to please let it stop. Then I feel this pressure in my cervix. So I get out of the bath super quickly. I'm like, no, I can't give birth in the bath. I have to get out. I have to get out right now. The baby's coming. And so I get out of the bath and I start to I continue to labor outside of the bath. And my contractions continue to get more and more intense until finally I get onto the bed and I start pushing. I'm like, this baby's coming out. So I start pushing, and you know, a lot of people, like, they are afraid of pushing a baby out. Like, that's where their fear really comes in. But it was actually so much easier than I thought it would be. I remember that I pushed like maybe 2 or 3 times. I really focused my mind and I just was in tune with what my body was doing. And I was able to push my baby's head out without feeling any pain. Finally, when his head was out, all my contractions stopped. And I remember it took like 5 minutes for another contraction to come. So while I'm there, you know, my legs are propped up, my baby's head is literally sticking out. My husband's like, oh my goodness, I can see my son's face. I crack this joke and I'm like, wow, this is not as bad as I thought it would be. And then my midwives laugh uncomfortably. They're just like, is this girl crazy? And then I'm just there, like, seriously saying to myself and to everyone who's listening, like, wow, this is not as bad as, you know, the movies or whatever portray it to be. This is actually a relief. It's a relief to push after you've been having contractions for however long, you know, because when you're pushing, then you know that it's the end, you know, or near the end. So finally, after those 5 minutes of us just kind of like watching my baby's head, waiting for the contraction to come, my contraction finally comes and the rest of the baby comes out. And I'm telling you, like, it was such a good experience for me. I really loved giving birth. I feel like it was so personal, intimate, and also super spiritual to go through that experience, especially with midwives. I feel like they really gave me my space. You know, they didn't bug me, they didn't bother me. They spoke in a calm voice. They didn't pressure me to do anything. It was I was in control, and my husband and I were the ones who were really in control of everything that was going on. And like, I remember seeing my baby for the first time. He was so cute. He was just so cute, and I was surprised at how like pink he was, because obviously I'm a darker person, but he came out so pink that I was like shocked. I'm like, wow, Lord, like I didn't expect him to look like that. Like, I had an idea in mind of what my child could possibly look like, but my idea was nothing compared to reality. He's such a beautiful, sweet little boy. So that brings me to the end of my birthing story, and it's a testimony to say that if we pray and we believe God for anything, we can ask God for anything. If we are walking in righteousness with Him and we are following after His law and loving Him and obeying His commandments and really seeking Him with our whole beings, then even when it comes to giving birth, God can answer our prayers, and He can be there right with us, speaking to us and holding our hand and helping us through it. And that was honestly my wonderful experience of giving birth. I hope you guys liked this video. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Share with me what your birthing stories are, or if you're pregnant and expecting, let me know, because I would love to help you pray for the things that you would like when it comes to giving birth. And obviously we pray for God's will to be done, which reminds me, I didn't get to do a home birth. I didn't get to do my initial plan, but God's plan was better because cleanup was so much easier. You know, it was a bloody experience. I didn't realize it would be such a bloody experience, you know, but in the end, God had his way, and I gave birth at the birthing center rather than giving birth at home. And I also didn't have a baby bag. I was not prepared. I didn't have my things, but my son was still perfectly healthy, and my delivery was super fast. So, in case you were wondering, I had my first contraction at 2:30 p.m. and my son was born at 5:29 p.m. So it was literally 2 hours and 59 minutes, or 3 hours, whatever. And then I had 2 hours and a half between my water breaking and my first contraction. So it really isn't a typical story, but it definitely is one that gives God glory. I give God so much glory for all that he has done. And with that being said, I have a little surprise for you guys. If you have watched this video all the way to the end, then you will know something very exciting. This has been my longest kept secret. And if you didn't understand it with the bib, I'll say it again. I'm pregnant! And we are expecting a baby girl. Very excited. I look forward to it. I look forward to seeing what my next birth story will be like. And I invite you guys on the journey. So, yay! I'm so excited to share it. And yeah, we'll see what the Lord will do in my life in the coming months. I'm due very soon. And so we'll talk about it more on the next video. God bless you guys and have a great, great day.